Hello everyone, and a warm welcome from Varjo HQ. Thank you for joining us from all across the globe. Today we have some really exciting news that I'm so happy to share with you. There is a great lineup and amazing content coming your way. I'm Pallavi and I'm going to be your host for tonight. My partners in crime will be Rune, the co-host, who's going to be interviewing superstar YouTube creators, Steve, who's also known as VR Flight Sim Guy, and Will from Boosted Media. I'm going to spend some time with Matthew from eSports and Gaming Manager from Alpine, and Olli, who's a 4-time bronze medalist from Overpower. Thank you for joining us. Today, we have experts among us that are going to be sharing their tips and tricks and their journey with sim racing and eSports, and how VR has had an impact on that. We have some key announcements. It's a really exciting announcement that I'm excited to share with you. We're going to also announce our very first Varjo community race, and then finally, we're going to announce someone who's going to win an Aero. So stay tuned till the end. Let's get this started.
This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unfriggin' believable. How is this even possible?
It is insanely clear.
This is an adequate full monitor replacement.
I find it very hard to go back to any other headset.
It literally feels absolutely insane. It makes me very excited about the future of VR.
The Aero isn't just a VR gaming device. It is a tool to explore virtual reality as a medium in a way that we haven't had accessible before.
I have never seen anything like this. I'm so excited for the VR community. This is what we've wanted for so long.
A warm welcome to Matthew from Alpine. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's nice to have you. So tell me about your journey in eSports.
So I've always been an avid gamer from when I was young, playing obviously, sort of child games to moving upwards to playing sort of traditional games and then sort of into more eSports titles. But it was when I was at university that I sort of started exploring the world of eSports as a potential career. So myself and some friends created an eSports society during our first year. By our third year of university, it was the biggest society on campus, and I'd started working with different businesses and companies around how they could leverage esports and gaming to increase their sort of community and showcase their products, etc. So I did that for a few years and started doing sort of consultancy work with bigger brands, and ultimately ended up doing a little bit of consultancy with Renault when they were in F1, and they had just announced a massive partnership with Team Vitality, which is one of the biggest, or I think it's the biggest esports team in France. And then when they transitioned to Alpine, I was invited to sort of join the team and help lead their sort of operations in esports and gaming.
Nice, that's an impressive journey. What do you do at Alpine?
So my day-to-day sort of varies. There's no sort of strict one day, but essentially I'm responsible, and the team that we have is responsible for representing Alpine in the digital space through all things sort of gaming related. So one of my main tasks is gaming licenses, which is basically making sure that Alpine as a brand is represented in as many gaming titles as possible, whether that be new models that we have or old models that we have, new models that are coming or old models that we have. And then it's our esports operations, so making sure that all of our drivers are ready for their competitions, making sure that all the paperwork's done, making sure that we have the right equipment, etc. To take part. So we take part in a number of competitions from different categories of racing. So we have the F1 eSports series that is one of our biggest titles and parallels the real racing that we do in F1 with Esteban and Pierre. We have 3 esports drivers who then compete in that series. We then have a lineup of other drivers who compete under the Alpine name in multiple titles around different forms of racing. So the Le Mans Virtual Series, which is sort of the parallel to the World Endurance Championship. But we also host our own competitions as Alpine. So we have the Alpine eSports Series, which is in its 3rd year. This year we had over 3,000 people attempt to qualify to take part for one of 40 slots on the grid. And there's a real world driving experience to be won for that. So the people who take part are driving the Alpine A110 GT4, and then the winner then gets the chance to drive that car in the real world at a track. So it's a really exciting thing to bring to the community and to showcase the Alpine brand.
Do you say anyone can apply to it?
Anyone can. I mean, you have to be quick, but yes, anyone can participate.
If you're good at it, apply for it. So tell me more about the team that you have at Alpine.
Yeah, so we have a number of drivers that operate across different titles. So we have Patrick, Luke, and Ruben, who are our F1 esports drivers. So they, like I said, sort of represent us in the digital F1 space. So very similar to what Esteban and Pierre do. For the real racing, these guys do in the digital space. So they're all quite young, but they're really nice people. And then we have other drivers as well who represent us in multiple different classifications. And everyone's a specialist. You can't just necessarily jump from one title to the next title. You're not just, oh, I'm a sim racer, so I'm therefore good at every competition. You know, we really try to find the best drivers for the best, for that competition, if that makes sense.
So you mentioned about the racing. Could you tell us more about the race itself, esports?
Yeah, it's essentially a digital realization or recreation of what happens in the real world, depending on what level of competition you're at. So different games have sort of different attributes that make them more realistic or less realistic. So the F1 games are more SimKD, which is essentially like a simplified version compared to something like iRacing or rFactor 2, which we compete in other titles. So it's a great way for us to showcase our skill and also vehicle range across multiple titles and multiple competitions.
Is that the reason Alpine's investing into VR?
It's part of it. I think VR is, you know, a very good showcase of top end equipment, you know, and sim racing is really about recreating as much of the real world experience in the digital space as you can. You know, you can't go and race a car, well, not unless you're very rich, but you can't go and race a car every afternoon. Whereas if you have a sim rig, then you can adapt that into your training and your practice routine. So for people that are looking to really be the top end racing, you know, you need to recreate as much of that real world experience as possible. And I think VR is that additional step outside of the sim rigs that you can have to bring yourself into that atmosphere. So, you know, for us, it's a case of looking at the future and seeing, well, actually, what technology is missing from the current sort of sim setup, and how can we enhance that and make, you know, give our drivers, give our future talent, whether they're, you know, 6 years old or whether they're 18 years old or however old they may be, you know, give them the best sort of opportunity and chance to develop.
What's been your personal experience with VR?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I personally had a fairly sort of negative opinion of VR when I'd first sort of heard about it. I think, you know, the games and titles that had been sort of spoken about and were very popular weren't, to me, necessarily a good showcase of the technology. And I was sort of not really living up to the hype of VR. It was only when I tried the Varjo headset for the first time that my mind was sort of blown and this sort of expectation was sort of washed away, and it was like, well, actually, this does feel very lifelike. You know, I was in a sim rig and I was in a car, and I felt that it was, you know, no different to me driving back at home, and it was a very bizarre experience to go from this sort of negative experience or negative sort of approach to understanding how VR can play such an integral part in development, and, you know, that's part of why we have this fantastic relationship with Varjo and are looking to use that technology to develop the business.
What are your thoughts of like future adoption of VR into esports itself?
Yeah, I think it's one of those questions that there's no sort of right or wrong answer, and I think VR technology does really enhance the experience, but it's also not going to be for everyone. You know, I don't think people that are sat at home playing on a console are necessarily going to have the right setup to embrace VR, but for people who are really looking for that sort of top-end premium experience, then that's where you can invest in VR and say, actually, I want to take myself to the next level. I want to be as close to reality, as close to the real world as possible without getting behind the wheel of a real car.
So bridging the gap between reality and virtuality.
Exactly.
I heard Ocon and Gasly have tried Aero as well.
Yeah, so we had an event at the beginning of this year, just after the partnership with Varjo was announced, and we had a huge sort of marketing and press event, but the two drivers were really keen to get in the sim, so it was a full motion simulator with the VR headset and everything, and they jumped in and they were immediately quicker than sort of anyone else that had gone that day, including people who were already sort of like quite specialist in sims, you know, and they just sort of completely detached from the fact they were playing a game and their brains sort of wired to being on track. They were so focused and they kind of forgot that they were in a simulator. You know, they were sat there for like half an hour just sort of concentrating on the racing. I mean, even to the point where Pierre climbed out of the sim and went to take off his gloves because he was that sort of connected to what he was doing in the sim rig that he hadn't necessarily, the brain hadn't caught up, shall we say.
Completely immersed.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
What would you say, give advice to listeners that want to become esports drivers?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is determination and passion. You know, it's very enjoyable to do as a hobby, but if you want to make a career out of it, you want to pursue it, then you need to commit to the time. You know, the way people get into real racing is by going go-karting every weekend and trying different categories. It's no different for sim racing. The only difference is the barrier to entry is quite low, or is lower than real racing. So, you know, if you're passionate about it and you're determined to be successful, push for it. And if you are talented, you know, us and other teams, but we won't talk about those, we'll find you. We'll look for those talents, and you know, we're constantly speaking to young drivers, you know, at events or online, etc., and really assessing their talent. And I think, you know, if you want to be one of those people, then you can be. You just need to push.
Okay, so one taking is just to keep on pushing, and
Absolutely.
Alpine will find you. Over to my co-host, Rune.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Rune. I'm here together with Steve and with Will. We're going to do talk a bit about the Varjo Aero and a bit about VR, both for sim racing and flight sim as well. For those that doesn't know about you, Steve and Will, could you shortly introduce a bit about yourself and talk about who you are, what you're doing?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. You want to go first, Steve?
Whatever, really. I don't mind.
You go first, mate.
I can't hear you very well, so apologies if I interrupt anybody. But yeah, just to say, hi everyone, I'm Steve. I've got a channel called VR Flight Sim Guy, and terrible name, but I couldn't think of anything better at the time. And yeah, I've got a huge passion for technology and aviation, and I think when the two combined together many years ago, when I got my first VR headset, I think for me the hobby changed forever, and since then I've just got this huge passion for VR. And the reason why I started a YouTube channel, because I just wanted to voice how amazed I was about it all. You know, I didn't really know many people in my own life that was into the VR at the time, so I just had to tell the world as best I could. And yeah, luckily there's a lot of other people out there that feel the same way, and that's kind of how the channel started. And it's amazing where we've come from if you consider what we've got now in terms of technology with VR. And yeah, it's just great to see where we are and where we're going in the future as well.
How about you, Will?
Yeah, so I basically just really like going fast, and I always have done. And I've always had a passion for not only technology, but for modifying things, making things do things that they aren't designed to do initially, and just sort of experimenting with electronics and technology and engines and cars and bikes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I started my channel originally as a project car building channel, following the build of a particular car that I owned at the time. And when I didn't own that car anymore, I kind of transitioned across to technology, and then sim racing kind of entered the scene when I had kids, and I didn't have time to take real cars out to real tracks anymore. So it was a bit of a natural progression, and yeah, I was lucky enough to, I guess, find a way to marry up all my various different interests and skills into the channel as it is now. So we've sort of focused primarily on hardware reviews and things like that, which I'm super passionate about. We do a lot of racing as well. And yeah, I'm just passionate about anything cutting edge, anything that's new and exciting, basically.
So in the previous session before this one, we heard a bit about the main benefits of VR in like the professional esports side from Alpine. But could both of you tell us a bit about how do you feel the Aero performs and what are like the benefits for both flight and sim racing simulation from like a gamer or like an enthusiast perspective?
Go for it, Will. Do you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. So with the Aero specifically, I mean, like that was the first super high end headset that I had ever had experience with. And up to that point, I'd used a couple of more entry level stuff, not super entry level, but relatively entry level. And when I put the Aero on for the very first time, like I'm not a massive, I'm a VR enthusiast, but I'm not somebody that has a huge amount of knowledge about VR specifically. I just enjoy the technology. So the first time I put that headset on, I was just blown away by the clarity, because although VR has progressed a long way up until that point, there were certain things about the experience that always reminded you subconsciously that it wasn't real, right? So you were never, at least for me, I was never fully immersed into the VR experience. There was always a little bit of screen door effect, or, you had quite a narrow field of view, or, blurriness outside of the sweet spot and so forth. And I put that Aero headset on for the first time and I was just like, what? It was just incredible. And yeah, so I'd say like that's, from a sim racing perspective, like there's two sorts of people in sim racing. You've got the people that just want to be fast and competitive, and then you've got the people that are pursuing the most realistic and immersive experience possible. And I think that what I found with the Aero was that, it was kind of delivering all of that, because it's giving you the peripheral vision and the clarity to see around you, have better spatial awareness in general, but also just immersing you in the clarity. And, one of the most important things is being able to see ahead on the track as well, because when you're racing, a lot of people would think that you're looking a couple of meters in front of the car, but you're actually looking to the next apex all the time. So you're always looking into the distance quite far. And if you're using a headset that doesn't allow you to see that clearly, it can be actually quite detrimental to the overall experience. So yeah, that was, I think, what really stood out to me about the Aero immediately, was just, this is like nothing I've ever experienced before, basically.
No, that's great and awesome to hear. Maybe follow-up question, like how I know you have a quite beefy monitor setup in your
Yep.
rig, or in your,
You could say that.
see it behind you briefly there. How would you compare the monitor setup that you have compared to VR in terms of like performance and things like that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So yeah, we have for those who aren't familiar, we have a triple 65-inch 4K display setup that we run here. It's designed primarily for content creation, so it's not something that I've ever recommended that anybody do at home, because it's just so far beyond the point of diminishing return. And obviously running triple 4K displays at a decent frame rate and refresh rate is very difficult. But yeah, look, the main differences that I find between that and VR, just in general, is that even with a triple screen display that big, it's very immersive. You're pulled into the environment, but you're still at the end of the day looking at a two-dimensional scene, right? So when you move yourself from side to side, you don't have that parallax effect. You don't get that sensation of depth in the image. You're moving, as a single point along a line within a two-dimensional space. So you don't, even though you have the peripheral vision, and you could even argue that with our particular setup, the peripheral vision is even wider, because I get about a 180-degree field of view. It pretty much fills my entire, like I can't see the edges of the screen. They're actually behind me. But it doesn't allow you to sort of get the same sense of awareness. Like I think probably the biggest difference in terms of what's an advantage of VR over a setup like that is, for example, if you're sitting in a Formula style car, so say like an F1 car, for example, in the 65-inch rig, you can't sort of get up and look over the side of the cockpit down at the wheel because you're in a fixed two-dimensional space. Whereas with VR, you can actually look up over the cockpit, and that is one thing that I find makes me a lot faster in VR in general, is that I'm able to spot my apexes and actually follow them in, and really drive the car to really fine margins right on the very edge of track limits. Whereas with the 65-inch 4K setup, I just don't have that same level of spatial awareness around me, even though it is very, very immersive. So that's probably the main difference, I would say.
So how about you, Steve? How do you think the Aero performs in general? And
I mean, everything Will was saying, I was just nodding my head because I totally agree with those points. And I think a lot of it translates really to any VR experience, especially that of a simulation, whether it is racing or flying, is that sense of presence. I think that's a huge deal for me. That really shocked me about VR, especially when I tried flying for the first time, is that spatial awareness. And I think, that's really essential, particularly for racing and flying, because if you're really going to sense, like the height, for instance, you're just not going to be able to feel that on a 2D image. And I've never experienced what Will has with a huge sort of surround triple monitor setup. That would be quite cool. But like he said, I think it's about being inside of that car, inside of that aircraft. That really truly blows you away. You look around like you would normally with your head. And I remember when I first did that, I think I spent about half an hour, probably longer, just not even flying, not even starting the engine, just looking around in disbelief, thinking I'm inside this aircraft. And it's almost like a boyhood dream if you think about it, because I remember when I used to do flight sim, like I had a flight sim club at school. How geeky is that? And in them days it was like just bits of lines and triangles. It wasn't even that great. But even with the advent of 3D technology, just the idea of just being able to jump into it and then being in that environment was just like it was just fantasy. So to be able to experience that in VR, and in the early days, like you were saying, we had real low resolution, but at that point it didn't matter to me, because it was just all about that experience of that 3D scape, being inside, and the presence and the spatial awareness, just mind-blowing. But then I realized excuse me, then I realized very quickly that it must be the same for race sims as well as flying, that in order to fly correctly you need to look at the cockpit gauges, and that's where things starts to fall down very quickly. And I soon realized that I couldn't read many things at all, just the sort of main dials, really, like the airspeed indicator, the altitude indicator, but anything specifically real important stuff, you just couldn't read it. And I think from a very early point, it soon struck me that we need higher resolution panels. And I kind of became quite a huge advocate for that clarity back in the early days, and I just wanted it so badly. And then we did get some fantastic headsets out there that really helped with that. I think if we think about the Reverb G2, which is sort of the mainstay of the kind of consumer VR space. And in many ways, it's still a great headset, but it was still marred by the very tiny sweet spot. And I used to start getting eye fatigue very quickly in that headset due to its Fresnel lenses. And it's funny, because I remember when Varjo, you guys very kindly loaned me a VR3. And it was like, for me, when I tried that headset with the spheric lenses, it completely ruined me for life. Because then I realized that I was able to see sort of 85-90% of the image completely clear, and in a cockpit situation where you have to read the dials and look around with your eyes, it was just essential. And I think at that point, there was no turning back for me, and I felt a little bit sort of a bit depressed, for lack of a better word, because going back to any other headset after that was just like, oh no, I can't do this anymore. I can't go back having seen what's the future. So when the Aero was sort of being thought about, and there was sort of discussions within Varjo about it, and we did have some discussions as well between me a few other people as well. I was so adamant to Varjo to just push this, and you've got to get this out, and to try and find a way of getting more consumer focused or prosumer focused headset. And when you did launch the Aero, I was just over the moon, because I knew that from that point, everyone was watching. All the other VR manufacturers are watching, and it's completely changed the landscape of what we think about with a VR headset. Because I still feel personally that image quality is the most important factor in a VR headset. Because otherwise, you're going to feel tired. Your eyes are going to start straining. It's not going to be a very nice experience. So, and that's for me where the Aero truly shines, is the quality of the image. Even today is just absolutely mind-blowing. And to be able to combine that clarity with the 3D presence, spatial awareness of flying, and then able to see the cockpit as well. It's almost like looking at a really high-resolution monitor, but in 3D. Yeah, it was a very special moment. And yeah, for me, that's where I want VR to continue going, is to push the boundaries like that. So really cool.
I was going to say, I think that there are some other companies that are getting pretty close now, but when you consider that it came out 2 years ago, it was like it's taken that long, at least out of the headsets that I've tried. And I haven't tried a massive variety of headsets, but yeah, it's basically taken 18 months to 2 years for the rest of the market to catch up, which I think is pretty remarkable. And there are still certain elements that I think that headset does better than any other ones that I've tested. Yeah, it's a funny thing, because I think VR to an extent is always a little bit about certain compromises. Like, you can have a massive field of view, or you can have a lot of clarity, or you can have high resolution, but you can't really have all three, because if you're going to have a wide field of view, you're going to get distortion. If you're going to have a wide field of view, you're going to need to have such high resolution that there isn't a graphics card that can even run it, for example. So there's always, like, I feel like VR is always kind of one generation ahead of where GPUs are at, and that kind of limits the experience to an extent. That's just my personal opinion on the situation from a sim racing perspective. And it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, Steve, because frame rate is a little bit less important in flight sim than it is in sim racing. But
yeah, I'm actually quite jealous of the sim racing community, because you guys can feasibly hit that target easier than a flight simulator. I think some of that
that's right, yeah.
Just due to the environment, the world, really. But yeah, like you say, it's less important to reach native frames per second. But having said that, it depends on what kind of flying you're doing, really. If you're going to be flying close to the ground very fast, then you're going to need a higher frame rate.
Absolutely, yeah. But yeah, look, to go back to your original question, I think that yeah, in terms of the clarity, I would say that the Aero is definitely still right up there for me, at least, and what I prefer to look at. For flight sim, I do appreciate that it's a bit lighter than some of the other headsets that I've tried as well. That definitely makes a difference. Very comfortable as well. But I'd say, honestly, the main thing that I personally really appreciate about the Aero compared to any other headset that I've ever tried is the integration in terms of software and the the virtual desktop that you have integrated in the software and everything like that. One of the things that I always found incredibly frustrating about VR when I tried it in the past was, particularly when you're trying to do content creation and things like that, you're having to take the headset off to go and open a window, you're having to load a profile, check that your controllers are working, check your pedals are functioning, do this, do that, do the other thing, put the headset back on, oh no, it's not centered correctly, pull the headset off, press a button, it just becomes very cumbersome. And when I use the Aero, just the user experience overall, and being able to do all the things that I needed to do for the most part right there with the headset on, without having to go up, down, up, down, up, down constantly, just made it something that I actually enjoyed and appreciated using, as opposed to something that was incredibly frustrating to get to the end result of the immersion. So yeah, that was probably the thing that I've enjoyed the most about the headset. And it sounds a little bit funny, I know, but those kinds of things do make a big difference to the overall experience.
I totally agree, Will. In fact, if I had to sort of pick the real key features of the Aero that even today stands way above anywhere else, any other manufacturer, it is quality, and quality. Literally, that I can't say that enough, and I've been saying this in my videos for such a long time now, and I do have comparisons of all the headsets I've tried. I feel very lucky that I've tried them all at this point, but as VR's continue to develop. That's probably not going to happen because there's going to be a lot of VR headsets coming out. But I have not tried any other VR headset that has the quality of the Aero. And I mean that in terms of the headset itself. I mean, I've got like 1,500 hours in my headset now, that Aero, and it's running. I know it's crazy, and it's still running strong. I've not had any issues with it at all, which is amazing. But also it's the software, because I think some people don't realize that, of course, Mario, you guys, you've got your head in the commercial space. So you're producing headsets for the Air Force, for professional use case scenarios. So when you use the Varjo-based software, it literally is a professional piece of software that's extremely well optimized. It's funny. I asked one of your colleagues once, how do you get the Varjo-based software to run so well on the GPU? And he was like, it's a secret, which made me laugh, because I think there is something going on there with the Varjo-based software that no other manufacturers have been able to implement so well, and it means you get higher frame rates, and there's a lot less resources going on in the background, which is a huge deal. You need as many frames per second, of course, in VR as you can get. So super important, that. And of course, I think the other thing I want to mention is the active cooling technology. This is something I don't know why every VR headset should have this. When you've got the headset on, you've got that beautiful brush of cold air that you can feel, and it's so light, and so it just makes you feel refreshed. It can also help with nausea as well if you feel a bit funny in VR. Just feeling refreshed, it makes you want to be in VR longer. And I think for those reasons alone, it's why the Aero is still my favorite VR headset I've ever tried. I'm not just saying this because this is a Mario webinar, because that's not the reason at all. I've said that in all my videos in the past, that it's just the combination of all those things come together. Like Will said, the light form factor, the virtual desktop, the active cooling technology, and for me, the durability and quality, reliability. I just think it's a great package. Yes, it is more money than other headsets, but it's more quality there. So, it stands to reason why it's the price it is.
For those that doesn't have VR today, or just started out with VR in general, both of you, do you have any tips or recommendations shortly here?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I wouldn't recommend someone go out and spend a £2,000 on a VR headset if they've just started out. I don't think that's a good idea, because not everyone's going to find VR as amazing as we do, because it is quite an intensive experience. So I would recommend getting something a bit cheaper to start with, perhaps, and build yourself up. However, if you do have the money and you want to go for the best, then you can go for the Aero. But I just think it's best to sort of not invest too much money into it straight away, just so that if it's not for you, you're not going to really regret it. But I just think, for me, it's all about small experiences for VR users. If you're new, please, for the love of God, don't be in VR for a long time. Literally only use it for 5-10 minutes, and then over time build up to probably half an hour over a matter of weeks or even months. Nothing would be worse than for you to go straight and try a roller coaster, or try flying, or racing as well, because that is intensive. Honestly, because the trouble is with our brains is that your brain will remember that feeling of putting on that headset and then feeling sick. So you'll always have that sort of
association.
So it's so important to have a good positive experience in VR from the start, because this is no joke, guys. VR is an extremely intensive experience. So to take your time with it. It will get your VR legs, as they call it, because otherwise you might regret it longer term, and it might put you off, and that would be a great shame, because I do feel virtual reality is the future when it comes to particularly simulation, that is racing and flying. I personally don't feel there's a better way of immersing yourself into that car, into that aircraft, but it does take time to get used to it. So just do that, and just be careful. Don't do too much too soon. I think that's probably my main bit of advice there, I think.
Yep. No, I totally agree with all of that. I would add on top of that for myself, and I don't have anywhere near the amount of experience that you do, but I would add be aware of the specs of your PC that you're going to need to actually run the headset that you're looking at getting, because that has a huge impact on the overall experience. If you go out and spend $2,000 on a headset, but you've only got, a 2060 or something, you're not going to be taking full advantage of the headset that you've bought. So it is, you have to consider all the bottlenecks and those things. And I guess also consider, as I was touching on before, there are different sacrifices that you're going to have to make in different areas depending on what's going to suit your needs best. So, if you're more of a person that's after the widest field of view possible, if that's the most important thing to you, the headset that's going to be most appropriate is going to be different from something that might have the highest possible resolution or the biggest sweet spot and clarity. So it's very important to actually have an understanding of what it is that you're trying to achieve before you just dive in, because bigger and more expensive doesn't necessarily mean better for you and your particular usage case. I would highly, highly, highly recommend try to get your hands on a couple of mates' headsets and try them. Try out as many different experiences as you possibly can to really understand, because a lot of the times you don't even know what's going to be most important to you until you put the headset on. And I find particularly with sim racing, it's very, very polarizing. Some people absolutely swear that they need to have that, 120-degree field of view, or it's just horrible. And other people say, oh, well, the narrower field of view is fine because it's just like wearing a helmet anyway. And, that's not technically actually true, because there are regulations around helmets and how much field of view you have to have. But, a lot of people find that, having that restricted field of view actually does, immerse them a little bit more, because it makes them feel like they're wearing a helmet, for example. So there's so many little factors, and a lot of them you're not really going to fully understand until you actually put a headset on and try it. So, if possible, try out as many different headsets as you can. Definitely look at the overall user experience with the headset as well. Don't just go off a spec sheet. Have a look at what it's like to use. Have a look at reviews. Have a look at user experiences, because those are the things that are going to have the biggest impact on the overall enjoyment that you have. And at the end of the day, it's a hobby. It's something that you're meant to enjoy. It's not something that's meant to frustrate you every time you use it or make you feel sick every time you use it. So, if you do all those things, you're much more likely to have a good experience. At least for me, that's been my experience anyhow.
Yes, spot on. Well, absolutely spot on. I think a lot of people will probably want to go for the high-end race sims and flight sims. I'm not quite sure what it is in the racing crowd scene, but for flying, obviously, you're going to want to try Microsoft Flight Simulator, but I actually wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend Aerofly FS2, because you're going to get a solid 90 frames per second on quite modest, systems, and you're going to need that high frame rate. Otherwise, you are going to feel a bit nauseous and a bit dodgy until you get used to sort of dealing with that. Because frames per second in a VR headset is so important in order to make you feel okay. And
not only the frame rate, but the stability of the frames as well. Like you can, even if you're achieving 120 frames a second, if it's dipping down to 60 and then coming back up and dropping and going back up, you feel like you're pausing, and it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for both of your feedback, guys. And I think that's the end of the question round for so far.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
I could talk about VR all day.
Thank you, Rune. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Will. And here we have Olli from Overpower.
Hello, everybody.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. My first time here. You have a beautiful HQ.
Thank you. You have been in this industry for like over a decade. What's it been like?
I mean, it has been a journey. I mean, thinking about starting like 11 years ago, my friend showed, there was a YouTube 11 years ago though, nice. So my friend showed me a video, and, I saw guys racing and decided immediately. I saw Gregor Huttu from Team Redline winning a world championship. I was like, I need to go and do this one as well. So, has been a quite eventful one, and still going.
Nice to hear that. What would you say your highlights have been from your career?
I mean, to 11 years, there's quite a lot of stories, good ones, and parties, and having fun, enjoying the time with all the fellow competitors. But I think being in Visa Vegas E-Race, which was a Formula E championship in 2017 with the $1 million prize pool was I think that has been and still is one of the biggest esports like live events in sim racing, and being there on top, and we were there for a week in Vegas with all the competitors and Formula E stars. I think that has been the highlight of my career so far, and you know, the party in Bellagio and you know that stuff, and then obviously being in F1 esports and being around with, you know, Lando Norris, Max, Fernando, and being a part of a big esports competition. We used to run there in the F1 esports races in next to the Chelsea Arena. You know, it's like a big world thing, and being there, those has been the nicest moments so far.
No, they sound interesting, and
Yeah,
it's amazing achievements.
It's okay.
Didn't you not win the 1 million race?
Oh, let's see. No, I think it. Yeah, it shows in the picture that there's the first position, but yeah, officially in the standings, I was third in the end.
What happened?
I think, yeah, well, you know, this Formula E had this fan boost thing. Have you heard about it? Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
I can tell you. So it was like it had this nice feature, so every fan could vote for their favorite driver for a fan boost. And top 3, I was one of them. From the 30 drivers, we got this 5-second power boost, like 50 kilowatts or something like that. Thanks everybody for voting. And you know, I during the race, I made a tactical move and pitted early, and which after I got the fan boost, and obviously I used it. I wanted to overtake a couple of guys, and then it kind of got stuck. So you know, I had extra power of to make very fast lap time. So I won the race by a fair margin, but you know, obviously everybody knew that something is wrong, and yeah, I went to the officials and said that, you know, maybe this is not the way sim racing should be, that somebody wins with a buck, and please take a look what you can do about it. I mean, in the end though, regulations said there was a line of telling that if there's a software glitch or bug, it doesn't affect on the standings. So basically I won, like officially I won, but I wanted to make it fair and came to the official that please do something to make this competition fair, and then I dropped to P3 with a little bit of compensation. Wow. And yeah, 200K less, but you know, I think I still had a good time. So
That's very noble of you.
thank you.
Thank you for owning up and keeping it fair. Well, P3 is not a bad position to be at.
I think, you know, I was on a streak of P3. I mean, four world champions in bronze medals, so I wanted to keep that as well. So.
Perfect. So, what have you been doing on your off seasons?
I mean, it's 11 off seasons or something like that. You know, it has. I've done quite a lot. But I think, you know, especially when I've been like on a semi-pro level basis, during the season, it's usually something between 9-10 months, what it takes, and it takes, you know, normal days, you start at 7 or 8 a.m. and it ends up pretty late, sometimes like 10-11 p.m. you sleep a little bit and then you start over again. It's a hard work and not much breaks. So, you know, when you do that for 9-10 months and then suddenly everything stops for 2 months, then your brain still keeps going and is active. And I wanted to, when I started sim racing and doing the world champs in 2014, when I won my first bronze medal, I started doing, we founded this Finnish Sim Racing Association because I found a lack of structure in the sport. So I felt like I had to somehow give back because the sport itself is so amazing, and I wanted to you know, give something back for the sport and make it better. So we founded a Finnish Sim Racing Association, which is a association which purpose is to enhance sim racing and make it more official, so to speak. So back in 2013-14, they were mainly community-based competitions, plus then the World Championship level. So there was a huge gap in between. And then, you know, together with some of the hardcore sim racers, we founded the association and started running Finnish championships in off seasons, and you know, it has been what 8-9 years doing that, and now it's approved by Finnish eSports Federation and Finnish Motorsport Federation, and over the time FIA has been involved as well. So you know, when the sport is close to your heart, you want to do things like that, and you know, that has been obviously story in the off seasons especially.
That's really great for the community. You're giving back to the community, and that's nice. So you got noble and give back to the community.
Yeah.
And what are you doing currently in your life?
Well, currently I'm changing a lot of diapers, which is fun, you know, having kids, and those will be my free time for the years to come. The younger one started sim racing a little bit already, so you know, watch yourself there. He's coming. No, but I used to do some air traffic controlling after my pro career in sim racing, and also was in the Finnish military on the aviation side, in the Air Force. But now, after the COVID started, I became an entrepreneur. So I currently manufacture sim rigs here in Finland, in the Arctic Circle, next to the Santa Claus.
So you're like the Santa Claus for sim racing.
Yeah, if you want a sim rig, you just write on the, you know, gift wish list that, you know, please pick a rig from Olli next door. He will bring it to you.
Please send letters to Olli the Santa.
Yeah, 100%.
How has VR impacted?
I think, you know, my first VR experience was in 2014, 15 with the Oculus DK2, you know, the early versions. So I feel like I'm kind of like somehow early adopter in VR. And I always felt like VR is a game changer in sim racing industry, just because of the fact that with VR you're able to get 3D experience. Not like in traditional monitors, but in VR you really like sit there in the cockpit and you're able to feel and sense things what you normally don't. And I think, you know, the core thing in sim racing in the end is to obviously have fun, but you know, try to get yourself simulate yourself in a real racing car. And I think, you know, you cannot get any closer than being in a VR headset and actually look like, you know, there's these mirrors and I'm actually on our roofs in Spa going 300 kilometers an hour and stuff like that. So, you know, I think it's an organic match with VR and sim racing, that VR is boosting the sport a lot to make it better. And obviously we are trying our best to give VR something back, so the story would continue.
How would you say VR compares to a screen?
I think, you know, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the biggest difference is that, you know, usually, well, the monitors are static, and the image rarely goes, like, if you move your head, the image goes still. And you have the image what you have in the monitors it's two-dimensional. But when you have VR, it's three-dimensional, so you can really like pinpoint out that okay, this cone, my braking marker is there and it's closing by this fast, and somebody's coming from right and trying to dive bomb you on the turn one, and you know, it changes a lot, because you can then be in a racing environment in a more natural way. So you don't have to, like we have usually when I'm doing when I've done eSports or pro level competitions in monitors you need to pinpoint out and highlight a lot of things which is not logical. And with VR, all those things comes in a quite natural way. So your driving experience is much more, you know, I'm a Finn, so my vocabulary is not that good, but I mean autonomous,
Yeah,
you know, like you don't have to think that much.
It's subconsciously controlled and
exactly.
you're like,
yeah, exactly.
You're immersed into it completely.
100%.
So we have a lot of viewers that aspire to become sim racers. What would you advise them?
Nice. That's a great question. I mean, if I would think that I would have the chance to talk to 10 years younger me when I started sim racing, I think, you know, I would say the main thing about sim racing or the main thing what everybody needs to remember is to enjoy the racing experience. And it's actually quite hard because, you know, by nature, sim racing it's a competition, and the whole purpose is to win and figure out who's the fastest. And if you don't accept loss or if you don't enjoy sim racing in a proper manner, then it could get really frustrating really quickly if you do like 10 races and crash. You know, in every race, it's going to be, you know, quite frustrating. So whatever the competition outcome is, you need to remember that you need to enjoy. Where's the camera? Enjoy, have fun, because in the end, though, everybody else is having fun, and that's the main thing.
So 3 takes from yours: be noble, give back to the community, keep practicing, and enjoy, have fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now is the time for some key announcements. I'm super excited. We have 3 key announcements for you guys. First up would be Varjo's going to host their first ever community race. And that's going to be supported by Gridfinder, and the registrations will open on Friday for hot laps. Please scan the QR that you see on the screen for further details and another opportunity to win an aero. Now, this is the moment that I've been waiting for, you've been waiting for. So, for the past 2 years, Aero has been recognized as for its highest visual fidelity. It's a pro-grade features and premium comfort. But there's this one feedback that's been circling around in communities about the price point being out of reach for many in the community. But today, I am super excited and happy to share that we're taking a step forward towards enabling true-to-life virtual reality for all. Watch this. Woohoo! Yes, that's right. You saw it. It's 9:90. It's super exciting times. What was your reaction?
I think, you know, it's going to be the best headset on the market for a long period of time. So, you know, congrats.
Yes, it will. It's super exciting times. We're committed to the community and we want to provide the best to everyone. Let's hear it from Steve and Will.
So now that we have recently heard a new information about the price drop from our studio in Helsinki, what are your thoughts on the new price on 990 euros?
I'm blown away with that. I'm just trying to work out. So that's about £800 in the UK.
Yeah.
That's a huge drop in price.
It is, yeah.
I'm actually quite stunned by that. But about you, Will, but that's a humongous drop in price. Wow.
It means that people can afford to buy a better GPU now, hopefully.
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, like, definitely. If you were budgeting for the old price, then yeah, that frees up some cash to remove some other bottlenecks, or it just saves a bunch of money. So yeah, that's good.
That my first thought is, so many more people are now going to understand what I've been raving about for 2 years.
Yeah.
So now they're going to have a much lower entry point into the most high quality VR there is out there. So if you obviously can produce the headset at that sort of price point, thank you. Like, I'm going to say thank you from all of the community, because they're going to be absolutely ecstatic with that price. That's an amazing price. So yeah, from the flight sim community, wow, thank you very much. That's fantastic news. That really is.
I'm super excited, and for you guys, now we've made it available to you guys. Now we have the point that we've been all waiting for. Thank you for tuning in. Someone's going to be a prize winner who's going to win a free Aero. That is, drum roll, Jonathan L. from Washington, USA. That is Jonathan L. from Washington, USA. You're the winner and you get a free Aero. Congratulations. Thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate your time. I hope you guys are as excited as I am for the Aero new price. Let's get Aeros. Thank you for tuning in.